Hello everyone, and welcome to the first episode of a new series, Point of View. In the new series, I shall be getting into a discussion with leaders from various organizations spread across India as well as across borders. The idea is to get into conversation with them, to get them to share their views about the various aspects that make organizations really amazing. The purpose is to understand what drives leaders to their own workplaces so that we can delve deeper into the corporate philosophy and share with you path breaking ideas. Ideas that come straight from people who have gone ahead and changed their workplace to make them better, more inviting, extremely thriving for their own people. Our first guest on the show is Nitin Thakur. Nitin is a senior brand and communication professional. He is currently a part of the group executive leadership team at the Max Group, which is a USD 3 billion conglomerate. Welcome, Nitin, to our show. This is a new
Thank you,
series
Ekta.
point of view, and I'm so glad that you accepted my proposal to be one of the first few guests. Nitin, you have been in a very critical position at Max Group and have helped in strengthening the group's reputation through traditional and digital media. Am I right?
That's correct. That's correct, Ekta.
Okay, so if I understand rightly, you have helped to provide leadership and guidance for strategic campaigns for mergers and acquisitions, crisis management, etc., for the group's operating companies. So, why don't you share something about your remarkable journey with our viewers?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be glad to. And I was pleasantly surprised to understand that I am the debutant for this show. It's the first time ever in my life that I've been first at anything. I couldn't even be the first child. I was second in row for that as well. So thank you for giving me opportunity to pioneer something.
Thanks for
Uh,
accepting that.
yeah, but coming to my journey, and I think I must. I'll give you a perspective a little bit from the schooling time and then quickly cover from there on. Uh, I'm envious of kids of today's time. A lot of them, by the time they're in their senior secondary, seem to have a fairly good idea of the two or three areas that they might want to make their career in. At least I'm talking about the urban upper middle class people. So I hear things like someone wants to go in astrophysics and someone wants to go into marine biology, etc. Uh, at the time I was in senior secondary, I had very little clue of what would interest me and what would I want to be. And coming from a family which had government servants, even they had very little idea of the progressive professions that exist, even in that time, 2 decades ago. Uh, so I started with, uh, after my graduation, or actually sometime during it also, we had a side business of trucking. Tried to enter that. Fairly quickly realized that dealing with the truck drivers and the other transportation industry business is probably not my cup of tea. Um, I was even I tried to supervise in a garment manufacturing house. Again, miserably failed at that. During my postgrad, I also tried actually starting a neighborhood paper. That was perhaps the first bit of success I had, along with a friend of mine. It was terrible and it was exciting at the same time. Terrible because me and my partner were the two-man company, and we would do everything right from editing the paper, writing the content, going and selling space for revenue in the newspaper, going early morning to the distribution outlets from where newspapers are distributed to hand over for distribution. So, that was a phase one got just 3-4 hours of sleep, but very good learning ground. Uh, Unfortunately, my friend decided to get married at that time. And also, the family was pressurizing me to pursue further education. So, I went on to do my MBA while he got happily married. Uh, and then after MBA, you know, was sort of trying to fall and discover something to do. First thing that I got into was event management, though I majored in finance. but that was the time of the great NBFC bust. So the economy was down. There was hardly any jobs in finance at all. Uh, but I must say, events taught me something which I like to repeat, that India, they should make either 2 years of military training compulsory or 2 years of events management. That was again baptism by fire, being up all nights, very tricky situations. As they say in events, you don't get a second take. You got to get it right the first time. Uh, but I realized from there on that, you know, while eventing is exciting, when you sit and talk to the brand managers in companies, there's a certain pecking order they have in their mind of marketing consultants. And event managers seem to be the lowest down the food chain. They're not looked at for many strategic inputs, mostly execution guy. So then I set on a path of self-discovery and landed up in communication in a PR consulting. And I didn't look back from there. I think that in that I found a career which I was suitable for doing. And so after working in a couple of consultancies, there's one startup which got uh, the communication mandate of the whole Tata group. The first time such a large mandate was consolidated in communication in India. So from day one, born with a silver spoon. From there on, I went on to work at Microsoft India for about 3 years, and and then eventually Max, where I have been working for more than a decade now. And I think you described some of the things that I get to do while working here, and I still get paid for doing that, which is right from the high flying world of corporate finance related communication, whether it's M&As and other such corporate structuring. Our business till recently was our group was in healthcare as well. So I have had the opportunity of handling some really hairy crises as as we went along, because healthcare is a very intense business per se. And I've also had the pleasure of starting the social media presence for the group a few years back, and proudly saying today that we are one of the Indian conglomerates with the largest followership on platforms like Facebook, etc., with more than 1.2 million followers. So yeah, I mean, it's been very fulfilling. It's been very exciting till now, and it's still not tiring at all. The groups keep starting new businesses. You get opportunity to try at your hand at new things, some directly related to communication, and now I started participating in marketing related activities as well.
Okay, pretty interesting, from dealing with truck drivers to garments and media, then finance, MBA, and then on to PR. I think that's pretty interesting for you, and must have been a roller coaster ride as well in terms of learning experiences.
Yes, absolutely. It was initially. Uh, I don't regret it at all. Um, Falling your way through discovering what you like to do, I think is superior to knowing from day one what you want to do, because then you would have never tried anything else at all.
I know. In fact, if you mentioned today's kids, I also feel that they are much privileged. They know what they want in life, but I think they also change their career path. But the only problem is that we never knew what we wanted. Then we know what they want, and then they change later on. So if they experience what they want first hand, and then they go on to change things in life. So I think they also experiment, but it's just a way we learned the hard way. So they have a still better way of learning, the millennials and the Gen Z that
You're
we
right there. I
have.
think they're ready to compromise much less than we
Yeah,
would, see things through.
absolutely. Their patience level
If
is
they're
very high.
uncomfortable in a certain situation, they would wait it out for only some time, and they would
Yeah,
take that brave step of making a change.
right.
We, perhaps some of us came from slightly traditional or meager backgrounds, didn't have the privilege, or I would say the courage to do that.
Absolutely, I agree with you. I also belong to the same genre. Yeah. So that's interesting. So Nitin, tell me one thing. Like apart from the self-discovery journey that you've gone through, when you started entering the corporate world, yeah, the world of PR, the world of organizations per se, what is it that attracted to you to an organization, or what is it that you look for, in an organization before choosing a job, apart from your role, actually? Because role, I understand you were looking at a different kind of a role, but what is it that about an organization attracted you?
So, Ekta, I'll be very honest. It's what this has been a process, a journey of discovery on what should I be looking at in an organization. In the early stages of the career, unfortunately, it was all about the compensation, uh, the title that one is getting, uh, the short-term growth that is possible. So if someone told me this is your 10 years journey, I would say, no, I just want to look at the next 1 or 2 year journey for now. Uh, but I think if you were to ask me today, uh, I would say three things. Uh, and the first is that uh, you need to work in an organization like it's your own family business. Now I know this sounds exactly opposite to what people talk about and say the organization should be professional. But then who says that family businesses, so to say, can't be professional? So imagine you are the youngest scion of a large family-raised business and you join at the grassroots or at a mid-level, etc., and so on. The sense of ownership that you'll get for the particular role that you're doing and for the well-being of the organization uh, would be at an entirely different level if you genuinely thought till the last day you work in that organization as if it was your own company and your future dependent on it. It's your family's business. It's their fortune. Uh, and so fooling yourself into believing it's your own company, to me, I think brings immense job satisfaction. It brings the confidence for you to be able to say the right things, do the right things, and which in turn leads to your own growth and development. Uh, the second thing, which is very important, is what's often called psychic income, uh, which is that the organization's line of business has to be in something which makes a meaningful difference to its consumers. And the more visible that impact, the increased propensity for me to sort of love working in that organization. And the third aspect would be opportunities, which is the opportunity to try new areas of work, new businesses. I wouldn't call myself a professional adventurer. So I definitely want the comfort zone of doing what I hone my skills at. Uh, but at the same time, I also want that mental stimulation that is involved in learning about new businesses or a new function or simply attacking a new problem.
Okay, so interesting. But tell me, Nathan, one thing. You mentioned about make joining, family-run business. Yeah. And we have some very good family-run businesses like the Mahindra or the Tatas. Your own Max Group is there, and so many others. So, how does one feel that you are part of that business? How does that feeling come? Where does it come from? Because either you are playing a role in an organization or you feel that it's your own business, it's your own organization, and you're part of the entire success and growth story. So where does that feeling stem from?
So first, a clarification. I didn't mean to say that you should prefer working in family-owned businesses.
Okay.
You could be working in a company which is a multinational or has widely distributed ownership,
Yeah.
but you have to mentally make yourself believe that you actually are in some way a small owner of that organization.
Okay. That
Um,
ownership has to be there.
yeah, and I didn't mean it in a cliched manner. You genuinely have to think it's my company.
Hmm.
Uh, I may be a relatively junior member of the company. There are more senior members of the family with a higher position. That's the only thing that will give you that confidence
Hmm.
to go up to your manager or your skip level manager and a lot of time have hard conversations which are important or beneficial for the company, or a role. So think about it. If I was a member of the family running a business, right?
Yeah.
I would have that courage to go a couple of years later and saying, I am bored with what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I want to do something else within the company. I want to try out this new thing. Uh, if you're thinking of it as a job which you're doing in somebody else's company, you'd probably half the time not be able to draw up that courage unless you have very, very encouraging managers, etc., and so on,
Yeah.
right?
I do agree.
Or the ability to call out and say, well, what this aspect that our company is doing, I think it's a terrible mistake. Again, you won't have that courage unless you feel that ownership.
Mm.
And it may put you in sticky situations temporarily, but I think eventually it helps you, it helps the company, it helps in your growth.
Okay. So basically, what we arrive at is that your role is very important, and you have to feel where your role fits in towards, reaching the end goal of the company. So your role as a, wherever you are, you may be playing a very small role in an organization, but it is a very important factor when it comes to the end product.
Yes,
A very important screw in the, entire process, basically, if I
yes,
can add.
yes,
Okay, this
yes.
reminds me of a very interesting, story that in one of Simon Sinek's book, he says that a person was asked, there were two people who were working on the building of a cathedral, and one of them was asked, what is it that you are doing? And he said, "Okay, I'm a laborer and I'm just putting the bricks on this building." And the other one said, like, "I'm helping build a cathedral." So that purpose, that purpose is very important at the end of the day, and I think purpose brings ownership to the entire role that you're playing, right?
Yes, it does. And the an average employee depends on the organization to lay out that purpose in front of him, to remind him constantly of the larger purpose. And if the organization fails to do that, then he just thinks exactly that, oh well, I'm yet another day, I'm laying yet another brick. So to a large extent, the onus has to be on you as well, to stand back and look towards the sky and imagine how the cathedral will look when finished.
Thank you so much. I think that gives a very good perspective to the whole discussion. So, tell me one thing, Nitin. Now, you are at a very senior position today, yeah, and you have seen a lot of, up highs and lows in your career. You have seen a lot of employees come and go in your organization. You're actually one of the building blocks in an organization, especially in this Max Group. So, what do you feel from your experience? What is it that makes employees stick in an organization and perform better and stay longer, basically?
A very, very good question. I think a lot of organizations are always challenged with attrition levels and how to make employees stick, at least the good ones. And now, what I'm going to say will sound cliched, but then I'm not claiming to have discovered a new secret formula for stickiness of employees. Uh, but yes, I do believe I have the license to talk about, given that I've been in the same organization now for more than a decade. Uh, and this goes back to what we're discussing. Again, 3 points. I do believe in the rule of three. Uh, and the first one here is what I said earlier. The organization needs to be able to visualize to each employee how his role counts and the difference that its role is making to the world. Now, this is much easier at senior positions for the organization to be able to demonstrate. But even for the junior level employees, they should see how they roll up into the big picture. The organization should just depend on the employee to work it out himself, because in the earlier stages of the career, they can't really see it, right? So you took a beautiful example, make them see the cathedral and not just that wall that they're building, that brick that they're laying. Uh, the second is that, there has to be an environment which encourages each employee to be the best version of themselves. So let me try and explain this. Uh, unless an organization hired wrongly, it clearly saw the capability and potential in an employee to begin with. So, you know, those organizations which realize that each individual can keep doing more and adding more value every few months, right? And providing that culture, that motivating employers, uh, you know, to push the employees to do more, right? Uh, Definitely will have employees for life. So often you hear this employee is not working. Initial promise was a lot, or till the last year the performance was good. Now he's distracted, or maybe he's not being able to cope up with the elevated responsibility. I genuinely believe it's not the person, it's the circumstance, it's the mindset of those around him. It's the environment. These can be the impediments. When I work with teams, and I believe for larger organizations as well, try to make each employee to be the best version they can be of themselves. And lastly, now I said I'll make 3 points. Uh, is to be able to differentiate and see what drives an employee professionally and personally, and catering for it. That'll ensure stickiness. And it can be different for each employee, right? For some, it can be growth, some, it can be just empathy for his personal situation and circumstances, etc. So I guess that those are the three.
Okay, interesting. So you list basically 3 points. One, the employee should be aware and inclined towards the larger goal of the organization. You should know,
So actually, on this one, you asked what should the organization do,
yeah,
right? So I said, yeah, the organization's responsibility is as much to visualize that to the employer.
absolutely, yeah. Definitely, as an employee, until it's a two-way relationship in any
Yeah,
case, yeah. And secondly, you're saying a growth environment wherein any employee should be given the opportunity to, go to his full potential, and
yes.
continuous growth is very important. And thirdly, what is the third point that you mentioned?
The third point is to say that the
Personal
organization
motivation.
should
Yeah.
make effort in seeing what
Mm.
really makes a difference to the employee's life. For
Yeah.
some, it can
That
be growth,
personal
some, it can be
motivation of
job
the
fulfillment.
employee.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Personal driving force, basically. Okay, interesting. This personal driving force is a new thing for me because, a lot of people, they do talk about the purpose and the growth factor, but yes, there has to be a personal motivating factor. What is it that drives me to do better?
And
So,
by the way, for any employee, it can keep changing every few years, right? Depending on the stage
quite
of life he or
possible.
she is.
Quite possible, yeah.
So if the organization recognizes that and caters to it,
Yeah.
uh, that'll be pretty good.
So I think to bind it all, we need a good communication also, so that, there's a lot of transparency and communication between the organization and the employee so that they understand each other's viewpoints better. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So, that brings us to another question that we have. And in fact, I actually wanted to ask you a separate question about the three most critical things that an organization must take care, which you have already answered. So now this brings us to the last question that we have. Uh,
But let me
we,
answer because this is an iteration of the
yeah,
earlier question,
I know.
and I'll keep it short. Again, rule of
Definitely.
three.
Yeah.
Uh, First, have a common purpose. Uh, Second, catered for the growth of the employee because and the growth of the organization. So
Yeah.
frankly, organizations which stop growing are in a stage of decay and will lose its appeal to the worthy employees. And the third is fairness, which includes components like meritocracy, mechanisms to recognize who's contributed towards a goal, uh,
Yeah.
goalposts which are not vague and don't change due to some reasons. So fairness, that last point has many components. So these three.
Okay. Thank you. So now this brings us to a very critical juncture of today's times, basically, which is work from home. Now, because of work from home, a lot of things have changed all over the world in workplaces. People are interacting remotely. So somehow onboardings have become virtual. Everything has become virtual, and there's a lot of discussion also how much of the workforce is now going to come to office. So that's also another critical point. In this kind of a scenario, From your organization perspective or a general perspective of your own experience, what do you feel is going to change in organizations, the way organizations are operating, and how is it going to affect the overall culture and, the dynamics of the relationship that people have with each other? How is it, the entire, scenario going to be affected by this? I know it's
Yeah.
a very huge and wide open question, but if you can just sum up.
I was just about to say that, Ekta, there are many questions in this question.
I know.
And I think firstly, we've examined it from multiple points of view. One, of course, as an employee who's himself been affected and who's been trying work from home as a model, but also because one of our businesses is actually in building build to lease commercial office spaces, high end ones. And therefore, the future of workspaces is an area that we've examined very, very closely, even before COVID and now post COVID, because we also have to then evaluate changing business model, our own business model for that business accordingly. Uh, so I think the first thing I would say is that this whole work from home thing becoming a big rage, and a lot of companies actually trying to sort of take credit on how smoothly they've done it. So it is human nature to make virtue out of a necessity. So we've done that successfully. And I believe that while we've adapted to the here and now, but even the most evolved organizations are just guessing the long-term implication of work from home on the employee and on the workplaces itself. Uh, Now, let me use an analogy which is very commonly discussed today, which is this whole thing about the vaccine for COVID, right? Uh, so take the vaccine before it's allowed for its mass usage, right? There are a lot of lab tests and experiments that are done. There are multiple stages of clinical trials, which take at least 2 years, from when the COVID settled out to the time we'll be able to actually mass produce and administer the vaccine. It'll take 2 years, right? When you're taking all the shortcuts. The last fastest vaccine creation was 10 years, by the way, just as a thing. So, uh, so you do a lot of tests and trials for that, right? But now look at the work from home experiment. That was forced on the world without any trials, right? And mass forced. So we don't know if work from home is an enduring medicine. Uh, we can only guess the long-term side effects of work from home. We can't really say with certainty what are the mutations in business life this work from home will cause, right? There's been no trial and test phase. Uh, but well, everybody is guessing and making predictions. So without the clinical trials of work from home, I will prophesize that there'll be three different organizational behaviors clearly that will emerge. Um, and to clarify, when we say work from home, what we actually saying is work from anywhere, right? So it's
Yeah.
WFA more than WFH.
Yeah.
So I think there'll be three kinds of companies in this area, or this component. First would be companies which have a progressive mindset, which primarily have knowledge workers in its workforce, and they have an innovative culture. I think they will be successfully able to develop a hybrid model, uh, which will lead to greater employee satisfaction while retaining the productivity levels. So that will be one end of a hybrid model emerging. The other end of the spectrum will be companies with old school thinking and a mix of knowledge worker and the hands and legs workforce. Uh, and I think that they will retract completely to the pre-COVID working style eventually when the pandemic goes away. So it'll be returned to normal. And the third category, I think, will try and ape the progressives, which I spoke about the first instance. Uh, but because they don't really have the innovation DNA within the company, they will start seeing progressive loss of productivity, due to the in this hybrid model. and they'll struggle in the in between space while gradually attracting to the pre-COVID working style. So, like any other major disruption that the world's seen, this will also sort of see a lot of winners and losers insofar as this work from anywhere concept is concerned.
Okay, that's a very interesting perspective. You've actually, very clearly summed it up. So how it's going to
Yeah.
be for the creative people, the progressive organizations, the middle players, and the people with the traditional mindset. So
By the way,
that's,
pure guesswork. None
yeah,
of us know how it will be. I don't think anybody can claim with certainty how it will be,
yeah,
uh, because there is a recency effect, anyways, in our judgments. Right now, if you ask people, everybody says, "Oh, the world of work has changed forever." We'll see in a couple of years.
yeah. What I feel is, my perspective is that yes, things will definitely change because change has come in the place. We have been exposed to something new which we were not expecting. I mean, work from home was always an option, never, a
Right,
compulsion. So,
right.
a lot of things definitely are going to change. And what I personally feel is that it would ultimately be up to you, your own way of life. What is that you like? So the company should give a choice to employees whether they want to work from home or they want to. In certain situations, definitely there are certain roles where being at the workplace is important. But yes, to a great extent, I think people will be given a choice.
See, Ekta, I think when we say this, uh, we have to imagine organizations which have large workforces,
Yeah,
and we have to see that collaborating working style is a fairly a norm in large organizations, right?
yeah.
Uh, Collaboration is actually very difficult practically. If right now everybody is at home, so it's much easier. You're on platforms like Zoom and Google Meets, etc. Imagine a situation, and I did face it recently,
Yeah.
where uh, out of a 5 member team which has to brainstorm, 4 of them were in a meeting room,
Mm.
and I was attending through Zoom.
Okay.
Half the time in that meeting went in the team trying to say, because they would move away while talking in the meeting room,
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to hear them. If they're scribbling something on a chart, my camera view is not correct. If I'm saying something, right? So now, if half the employees are working from home in such a scenario and half aren't, you're not going to have a very productive meeting. And the organization will have to then install a really high-end
Mm.
virtual conference technology to
Yeah.
enable a on-site plus off-site collaboration,
Mm.
which is seamless, which they wouldn't be able to do in multiple offices because it will be a lot of investment in infrastructure. Then there are other components such as the reality of India, where the moment you go beyond the top leadership, right, there are patchy connections. The power cut itself can happen, and not everybody has reliable backup. You have crowded homes, so this isolated space for working gets no problem. These are things that decision makers don't think about when they may make brave commitments about work from home forever. And the fact that the relatively junior employees, let's say in the first 10 years of your career,
Mm.
you do need apprenticeship to that mentoring physically to grow. And then there are some of those silent employees who are at the short end of this electronic leash, and they just will remain the silent majority if work from home continues. Now, I'm not advocating work from office per se, but I'm saying there are so many components or aspects that come into it. For you as a woman, right? Uh, I think work from home for a lot of women, they'll be disproportionately disadvantaged because then they're expected to keep doing the household chores as well because they are working from home.
Yeah.
So, well, we'll see. It's a complex area.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. So, especially, I mean, the thing is, you talk to n number of people, and we all have different views about this. So, like you mentioned, the collaborative part. If you have to collaborate, then yes, you have to be face to face. But if it is an individual role, you'll be sometimes, you'll be performing better when you are away from, you're not wasting your time in chit chatting or other stuff. So you're, especially for millennials, uh, who
Correct.
have a certain, kind of coding roles or, those kind of things. For them, it is good enough, working
Yeah.
from
So for
anywhere.
IT services companies, it may be easier.
Yeah, definitely. So we can't, kind of weigh everybody on the same scale for this.
Yes. Yes.
So let's see what happens. I'll be continuing with these discussions and I'll be getting new perspectives. And thank you so much, Nitin, for taking out time for amazing workplaces and coming on the show. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having you and discussing with you and coming learning about your journey. Thanks once again. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Ekta.
Have a
It was
great
an
day.
absolute pleasure. And I think we had a very interesting chat.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.